Welcome to Roundhill Radio. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, look for moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we talk about faith. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Leslie.
How you doing?
I'm great. How about you?
Good. Welcome back, everybody.
Welcome back.
I'm going to call this season 9 in the completely arbitrary way that I season our episodes and our podcast.
Season 9.
Season 9. So I've decided this is now season 9.
I love it.
You know, it's a new year. It's a new school year.
Yes.
Which I still operate on.
Yeah.
10 years after graduating from grad school. I'm like,
well,
no,
that's
this
going
is
to continue
how...
for a while for you.
Well, yeah, because, toddler preschool is starting up again. So there we go.
Right.
What are we talking about?
We're talking about the thing that matters most.
Great. Stupendous.
And that's how we'll get started.
That's a big one.
With a bang.
I like it. That's
What matters
quite a
most?
bang. What matters most? Because we finished a year
Yes.
of our worship series entitled What Matters Most.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been great.
Well, I think it's great to pause and celebrate the fact that we spent a whole year talking about values that are good for us and good for the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, in the midst of a world that has so much turbulence and challenge, I think that was, to me, it felt very satisfying to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we received great feedback from, those who were part of the discussion, whether that was online or through our podcast or in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a really, really rich year. And I think the goal of all these things is that, they shape us in ways that we can't even tell. Hopefully that's for the good. But I think that's the exciting part of it, to see what's going to be the long range impact. And I think that's exciting.
That is exciting.
Yeah.
Do you have a particular value, quality that, I guess my question is, does you have a favorite? And if you couldn't choose a favorite, is there one that sticks out as maybe the most memorable or most challenging?
I think the one that I would choose is slightly different from the one that I heard people choosing.
Oh, interesting.
When they talked about it, but they're very closely related.
Okay.
So for me, if there was one that I could choose, it would be imagination.
Interesting.
And this is actually the 40th anniversary of a book that was published by a scholar named Walter Brueggemann, who's a really fantastic scholar. There's a wonderful interview with him on Krista Tippett's show On Being, which I think might have been the most listened. I think she had the most listeners for that episode of any, and she brings on so many amazing guests.
Right.
But to have a biblical scholar rock star, it was just wonderful.
So
anyway,
cool.
He coined the term prophetic imagination, which is drawing from these wonderful biblical poets, their vision of a world that's at peace with itself, the vision of a world where resurrection is possible in places that look like dead ends. So he wrote 2 books, actually, Prophetic Imagination and Hopeful Imagination, that really influenced me. So I would say 40 years down the road, that's probably the value that I would mention, because I think it's what gives juice to all the other values.
Got it.
It's how we put love in action, all of those things. But the one that I heard, I think is a kind of a favorite in the congregation, was curiosity.
Same. Yeah.
I think people really warmed to that and would love to get much more of it. Yeah.
I was going to say, I was suspecting that was the one, because I felt like for me, I think that, like you said, they are tied together in a way. But I just feel like curiosity feels so fundamental to vibrancy.
Yes.
And it opens so many doors to so many different things.
Yes.
And I like that.
Well, I think that curiosity got a big boost from Ted Lasso. So, there was an episode of that amazing show about Ted Lasso, the football coach,
Oh, it's the dart game.
The dart game.
The dart game.
Right?
I forgot he was talking about curiosity in the dart game.
Yeah. And, that really went viral in that one particular episode. So he's this American football coach who goes to coach a British soccer team. Suppose he doesn't know anything. And somebody in the pub when he's playing the dart game says he doesn't know anything. It really kind of puts him down.
Yeah.
And then he says, well, this sort of reminds him of a time earlier in his life where other kids used to make fun of him and put him down. And he finally realizes that those kids, he said, were never curious about me. They were only judgmental.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, he goes ahead to win this dart game and embarrasses this other person,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But in a kind of a nice,
in a very Ted Lasso way,
humble way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But I think that when during that particular episode, there was a little line that came out of it that said, "Be curious, not judgmental."
Mm-hmm.
If we just use that line a lot more, in our public lives, our leaders across the board, that in and of itself would change the framework, that most of us are looking through.
Yeah.
Be curious, not judgmental. And why not? So
That's huge.
It is gigantic.
Yeah. It was a church I worked for a while whose motto was, they put on like bumper stickers, like, be kind.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's more care and intention behind this idea of be curious. There's something, I think, a little that takes it another level.
I agree.
Because I feel that maybe kindness is implied in being curious. I don't think you can be curious without a kindness element in there, which I think is sort of gives it a different, more depth. I
agree. I think that, also some of these things just need definition, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when someone says be kind, I need to be curious about that.
Right.
What exactly does that mean?
Right.
And, because kindness can also be a kind of power, right? I mean, a good kind of power. And to be kind to someone who's not being kind to you, that does take some effort.
Yeah.
It's not an easy thing.
Yeah.
And so, I think that the phrase "be curious, not judgmental" is a little more specific, and so that if I'm encountering somebody whose, let's say, political views are really different from my own, then my option here is to say, I don't understand why you're thinking that way, and it's really different from the way I'm thinking. So help me to understand, and maybe there is some common ground here, but we're never going to find it if we don't kind of dig away at the surface a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's what curiosity can help with.
How do curiosity and imagination intersect for you?
I think curiosity is actually the point of departure, and then imagination is the train running on its track after that.
Got it.
Because I think curiosity asks the question, I wonder, what would happen, or why is that like that? It just wants to know more, right? It's not settled.
Yeah.
And imagination then says, well, now that I have a sense of that, what if I took what I've learned there and applied it over here? So that would be a thought.
May I bring this back to Sesame Street?
Of course you can.
I've learned so many wonderful life lessons through Sesame Street. Not only my childhood, but now with the second childhood of being a parent. Curious. So they have this thing they've done for a few seasons, which is, I wonder, what if, let's try, as a problem-solving matrix, if you will. And so for me, the curiosity is, I wonder. Then imagination is, what if? And then let's try. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You just start over again, do it again.
Yep. I think it's right there.
It's right there. It's all built in together.
Yep. But if you don't have that initial curiosity, and I think wonder is a great gateway to it, then you may never get to the point where imagination asks, what if? So I love that. I think that's a wonderful thing for any person.
It's it's genuinely very useful. I recommend it to kids of all ages.
It just reminds me, that's such a great little, I don't want to call it a formula because that's too trite, that's too fixed.
Yeah.
But it's a nice flow.
Yeah.
And, when I hear people say sometimes in life, like, don't settle, don't settle for this particular comfort zone, or don't settle for the fact that you think you've got it all figured out in this way.
Sure.
Maybe there's a door behind that door,
sure,
and a door behind that one. And I think that this is a good case in point where the person who asks that question or just says, I wonder, they've decided not to settle for what's there. They take it the next step. And that's very exciting. We can feel that actually, I think, in our bodies when we start asking those questions.
Yeah.
You can feel a sort of endorphin rush, if that's the right phrase.
Yeah.
Because now we're all engaged, and that's very exciting.
Are there any attributes, values, ideas that you would have included if you had more time?
Oh, I thought about this the whole way through. And Here's the thing. I actually feel really good about the 12.
Awesome.
Yeah. So as I look back at it, I honestly don't feel like there is a glaring omission.
Well, that's something.
So that, right?
Well done.
I do think that there are some qualities like persistence or resilience, perseverance, which we talked a lot about during the pandemic. Grit, which probably could have been emphasized more, could have been rolled into almost any one of these values. So that's just something that I think was a matter of emphasis, because most of these values, they don't take without perseverance, right? We've used the phrase a few times these last few weeks, Emily Dickinson phrase, a long obedience in the same direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's another way of talking about perseverance. I might have elevated that more looking back on the whole process. I actually am glad. So I can't think of an obvious omission, right? The only thing that I will say is that there is a phrase that's used in the New Testament that sometimes is used in memorial services. She fought the good fight.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And that can apply in so many different ways. It could be in terms of a personal caregiving for someone else. It could be that someone struggled with an illness, a life-threatening illness. It could be someone who was advocating for justice, or, you can go on and on and on. But to say she fought the good fight. So what I want to say about that is that, it's interesting because that's a positive use of the word fight.
Right.
Right. And that doesn't often happen much.
No.
So we do have the phrase "good trouble" in
Yes.
our now vocabulary of faith.
Yes.
But fight the good fight, that implies again a kind of boldness, and along with perseverance, maybe that's something that needs to be accented more. But aside from that, I'm feeling pretty good about it.
Well, that's something.
I think it is
I
something.
think that's great. Well done. I think it was collaboratively chosen with our board, right?
Yes, yeah. The board of trustees kind of, developed this whole movement and clarity, and actually wrote neat little thumbnail descriptions for each word.
I love that.
And I kind of kept those right in front of me, for the whole time. So I could kind of refer back to them. I think that was a really helpful thing to do. And then we had an initial listing in order which you and I looked at and then changed. You in particular.
I tweaked it slightly.
You did.
And
And so it was much improved after that. So that was another, it was meant to be a fluid document.
Sure.
So, you took advantage of the fluidity.
As I tend to do.
So I think that was great. And I think it was a gift to do it. And now we move from there onward.
Onward.
So
where are we heading onward?
We've got some exciting things in the offing.
We do.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna skip right over like the next 3 months. And say that, you and I have been thinking now for a while about this book length series, another year-long series called 52 for the Journey. And we've talked about that in our podcast a little bit.
We have.
And so I think now we're going to, we'll launch that, and it'll be very, very beginning of December. So we have a nice lead up time.
Yeah.
For that, and we're continuing to put the final touches on the guide that will go along, which you have designed
Guidebook and journal.
amazingly well.
Thanks.
It's beautiful. It's just so great to have literally a guide for this. And so that's the big thing.
Yeah.
In the meantime,
skipping back,
we've got a few other things going on.
We do.
And you and I have talked about bringing back into the circle of our discussions one of the great poets and prophets from the Old Testament, Elijah, because there's so much that can be talked about in terms of him. You know, artists have been drawn to him, musicians, composers, novelists. It's interesting that of all the characters in the Bible, right, how many, hundreds and hundreds, there's something about Elijah.
I'm excited to dive into him more because I think I had some preconceived notions, and I'm finding him very exciting in a way I truly did not anticipate. I'll be honest with you.
Well, and I think he's such a many-sided figure, and he's been utilized by people whose actual faith we might deplore. And we'll be talking about that down the road. But, because there are moments in his stories where he is extraordinarily violent, some of those stories have been utilized by people who want to use that violence or use those stories to sanction their violence in the world. So that's troubling.
Yeah.
And how do we approach those stories? Right. That's very important because there are so many other stories like them in the Bible. Right. So if we're not just going to, take our scissors and cut them out, what are we going to do with them? How are we going to read them? So it actually is an opportunity for discussion about that. But also, he can be so tender.
Yeah.
And so life-giving and so compassionate. So how does all that live inside one person?
Right.
That's what's fascinating, And I think that's why people are drawn to him, because actually he sort of feels like us.
Yeah.
Like we got all these different surges in us.
Yeah.
And so does he.
Yeah. All the different wolves that you decide who to feed, right? That phrase.
Yep. Yeah. Which one's gonna, be fed.
Right.
And so I think that's going to be exciting. And we've got some other wonderful things happening, I think, in the autumn too, that we'll be able to lift up, alongside those stories. But that's kind of where we're headed.
That's exciting.
Yeah. Full steam ahead.
Full steam ahead. Well, welcome back on the ride.
Indeed.
Back on the Round Hill Radio train. We are so grateful for you to be joining us today. And we'll be back here next week. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.
If you enjoyed this podcast, there are a few things that you can do that would make a big difference to us. Like the video, subscribe if you aren't, and click the notification bell and select all. Thank you.